On the eve of my wedding to Philip, his archrival died in a car crash. Only then did I discover the hidden and overwhelming love Philip had for her. At the crash scene, he held her in his arms and cried as if his heart had been torn apart. To make up for his regrets, he postponed our wedding and traveled the world carrying her ashes. After finally letting go, he returned and settled down to prepare for our wedding. Only then did he learn that the other body at the accident scene, the one no one cared about, was mine. Chapter 01. The day I returned from a business trip, I was hit by a car in front of Philip's company. The midday sunlight fell on me, leaving my body pale and cold. My soul floated above the middle of the road, staring blankly at Philip kneeling on the ground, crying uncontrollably. His eyes were bloodshot as he held the face of the person in his arms, his expression filled with despair and devastation. I lowered my head and looked at Philip's handsome profile, feeling countless tiny pains spread through my heart. The person in his arms wasn't me. It was his archrival, Cressida. They fought fiercely in the business world and secretly sabotaged each other in private. Whenever Philip mentioned her, he would always show nothing but disgust. But now, he buried his head against Cressida's neck like an abandoned puppy, sobbing as he confessed the secret love that had torn him apart. Cressida, wake up. Open your eyes and look at me. I'll never go against you again. Don't scare me, please. Wake up. Bitterness and confusion surged through my heart. I stared helplessly at Cressida. Philip had wiped her face clean and carefully held her in his arms. She looked peaceful, as if she were only asleep. Meanwhile, I lay not far away like a broken doll, covered in dirt and completely disheveled. The hem of my white dress fluttered in the wind, exposing me in an embarrassing and undignified way in front of everyone. Yet from beginning to end, my fiancé never noticed me beside him, even though I was wearing the white dress he gave me. Even though the engagement ring on my ring finger reflected a blinding light, his eyes held only Cressida. There was no room for anyone else. The medical staff looked at me with pity. They wrapped my body in a white sheet and hurriedly lifted me onto a stretcher. When they passed in front of Philip, he suddenly looked up. I froze. Did he recognize me? But the next second, he picked up Cressida and rushed forward, knocking my stretcher aside. He fell to his knees in front of the medical staff with a thud. Doctor, please. I'm begging you, save her. Chapter 02. In everyone's eyes, Philip was a cold and noble man who rarely showed his emotions. Even in front of me, he always maintained a restrained and composed appearance. Even when his feelings grew intense, he would only lower his voice, breathing heavily as he whispered broken praises in my ear, telling me how good I was. But now, for Cressida, the woman who had stolen countless clients from him, he could kneel before everyone without a shred of dignity. Crying uncontrollably, I studied Philip's face carefully. His features looked as if they had been carved with precision. His usually indifferent expression had completely shattered, replaced by a twisted and overwhelming emotion, making him look like a mad dog that had lost control. Only now did I realize, it wasn't that he couldn't express his emotions. It was that his hatred, his anger, and his love had all belonged to Cressida. The love that had once seeped deep into my bones was ripped away in an instant. I felt sick. I took several steps back, not wanting to see his face anymore. Then a phone with a shattered screen suddenly caught my attention. The white phone case, decorated with a teddy bear charm, belonged to Cressida. The screen was still frozen on her chat with Philip. The last two messages were from Philip. I'm getting married. And Cressida's reply, wait for me. I suddenly remembered how I had died. I hadn't told Philip that my business trip had ended early. The moment I got off the plane, I went straight to his company, wanting to surprise him, thinking of how, before I left, he had leaned against the doorframe and gently told me he couldn't bear to be apart from me and that we would get married as soon as I returned. I unconsciously quickened my pace, but instead, I ran into Cressida downstairs. She held up her phone, her voice soft, with a hint of barely hidden contempt in her eyes. Did you see it clearly, Beatrice? As long as I don't agree, you two will never get married. He hates me, but he loves me even more. I'm the one who truly stands equal with him as his partner. After saying that, she looked me up and down, a faint smile appearing on her lips. I hope you have some self-awareness and leave on your own. I don't want to have to deal with you. I raised my hand and slapped her. After that, My memories became blurry. I only remembered a few scattered images: a runaway van, screaming bystanders, and Philip's staggering figure rushing toward Cressida. Chapter 03. For some reason, my soul couldn't wander too far away from Philip. I followed him to the hospital, only to be driven away by Cressida's family. After returning home, Philip locked himself inside the house. He turned off his phone and curled up on the sofa, drinking himself into a complete mess. He had once said that alcohol damaged the brain. He hadn't even touched a single drop at our engagement party. But now, he drank day and night, as if he wanted to drink himself to death and follow Cressida into the grave. It wasn't until the fourth day that Sean brought his assistant Andy and broke into the house by force. Without saying a word, he punched Philip. "Philip, I know you're hurting, but you need to pull yourself together today. Are you really not even going to her funeral?" Philip's head was knocked to the side from the impact. His messy bangs fell over his forehead, making him look completely exhausted and worn out. He let out a soft laugh and spoke indifferently. "Sean, I regret it. I should have realized my feelings sooner. When Cressida was alive, I kept fighting against her. She didn't even know that I loved her." Sean froze. "Cressida? Not Beatrice." At the mention of my name, Philip paused for a moment. He closed his eyes briefly, rubbed his temples irritably, and spoke in a hoarse voice. "Did she send you here? Cressida is already dead. Why is she still fighting with a dead person? It's not like I'm refusing to marry her. The wedding is only postponed. Tell her to stop making a scene." I rested my chin on my hand and stared at Philip. There wasn't even a trace of guilt in his dark eyes. Oh, right. He still didn't know that I was dead too. The assistant opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but Sean raised his hand and stopped him. He lowered his eyes at Philip. After a long silence, he gave a cold laugh. "Fine, since you've made your decision. When she comes back from her business trip, I'll talk to her. I hope you won't regret this." After saying that, he turned around and left with the assistant, who looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't. I followed them to the staircase and heard the assistant carefully ask, "Shouldn't we tell Philip about Beatrice?" Sean stopped. His voice was hoarse and exhausted. "I'll handle her situation. Don't tell Philip yet. He won't be able to take it. The most important thing is, Beatrice probably wouldn't want to see him either." I leaned against the doorframe, looking at Sean's reddened eyes, and gave a bitter smile. The three of us had grown up together in an orphanage and later entered the same university. After graduation, we founded the company we have today together. Back then, Philip and I lived in a shabby basement. One night, after returning from a business dinner, he saw me eating instant noodles. He hugged me with heartache and swore that he would never let me down, that he would give me a happy home. At that time, his greatest wish was to marry me in a grand and glorious wedding. But now, he lived in a luxurious apartment in the city center, and his biggest problem was how to get rid of me. Chapter 04. 3 days later, I still hadn't found a way to leave Philip, but Philip unexpectedly cleaned himself up and looked completely different. Confused, I followed behind him until he knelt outside Cressida's family's villa. Only then did I understand why he had come. He wanted Cressida's ashes. Even though I had mentally prepared myself, my heart still instinctively ached. A week had passed. He didn't care at all why I hadn't returned, or whether something dangerous had happened to me. Yet he was willing to kneel outside his enemy's home and beg for the ashes of the woman who had once been his rival. Cressida's family valued only profit. They didn't care about losing an insignificant daughter. They only wanted to squeeze out the last bit of value she had left. They demanded the most important project in my hands in exchange for Cressida's ashes. It was the project I had spent months working overtime on, drinking with clients until I almost threw up, and finally secured after spending 3 days in the hospital receiving 4 treatment. Back then, Philip had rarely gotten angry with me. He had scolded me for not taking care of my health. But now, he agreed without hesitation. My heart ached, but I also felt a little regretful. All the effort I had put into building our future had ultimately become the stepping stone for him to pursue Cressida. The urn was brought out by Oscar, Cressida's half-brother. Philip carefully took it from him. Under the flickering lights, he lowered his eyes. His dark lashes cast faint shadows on his pale face. A tear slid down from the corner of his reddened eye. "Thank you." His hoarse voice disappeared into the wind. and the last trace of love I had for him completely vanished. Chapter 05. After leaving, Philip rushed straight to the airport without stopping. On the way, he received a call from Sean. The voice on the other end sounded anxious and slightly distorted. Andy said you booked a cruise ticket for a round-the-world trip. You're leaving today. Philip, have you lost your mind? Philip quietly moved the phone away from his ear. He held the urn tightly in his arms, his dark eyes rippling with endless tenderness. Yes, I'm going with Cressida. A faint smile appeared on his lips. We missed too many years together. I don't want to live with regrets anymore. I want to love her purely and completely for 1 year. As for Beatrice, let's postpone the wedding. Sean was silent for a long moment before finally losing control and roaring. Do you still have the nerve to mention Beatrice? Beatrice is dead. She died right in front of you. Philip lowered his eyes and let out a soft sigh. Sean, why are you joining her in making such a ridiculous scene? I haven't even stepped outside my house these days. How could she have died in front of me? Don't make jokes like this without knowing your limits again. Sean laughed out of anger. I'm not joking. If you don't believe me, then you. Enough. Sean, no matter what you say, I won't go back. Philip interrupted him in a deep voice. With you and Beatrice at the company, I'm not worried. His tone was calm but firm. A person only lives once. Just let me be selfish this one time. After saying that, he hung up the phone. Then, without hesitation, he removed the SIM card and snapped it in half with his fingers. I lowered my eyes and stared at the darkened screen. I couldn't help imagining Sean's furious expression on the other end of the call. With his temper, I was still worried about him handling the company alone. Actually, even back when we were students, his temper had always been terrible. During the first monthly exam of senior year, I ranked first in the entire grade. The day after the results were announced, I arrived at the classroom and found my desk stuffed with trash. Someone had carved several words onto the desktop. Cheating dog. Before I could even react, Sean threw down his school bag in anger, grabbed the culprit by the collar, and dragged him out of the classroom. Philip, meanwhile, silently poured me a cup of hot water, cleaned my desk bit by bit, and then went to ask the teacher for the surveillance footage. I had done nothing. I simply sat firmly at the top of the rankings once, then again, and again. Looking back now, this had always been our roles from childhood. Sean charged forward into battle. Philip planned and strategized, and I held down the fort. The three of us were indispensable. But now, Sean had lost 2 of his closest companions at once. I was worried about him. Philip, however, had no such concerns. After getting off the plane, he even had the time to replace Cressida's urn with a more beautiful one. It was decorated with colorful carvings and embedded with diamonds. Passionate and dazzling, it looked exactly like Cressida. Chapter 06. I remembered the first time I met Cressida. Back then, the 3 of us went to a bar to celebrate Sean's birthday. In the noisy and crowded dance floor, Cressida stood out in a red dress. Her features were stunning, her beauty impossible to ignore. Drunk, she stumbled into Philip's arms and looked up at him. Maybe the atmosphere was too intoxicating. She glanced at me provocatively, grabbed Philip's face, and kissed him. Philip froze. His pupils contracted sharply as he pushed her away forcefully and took several steps back. Where did this crazy woman come from? He frowned while looking at Cressida, who had fallen onto broken glass. Then he turned around, took my hand, and walked away. His voice was full of disgust, and his expression was cold, but I noticed a faint blush slowly spreading across his ears. That night, Cressida's hand was cut by the broken glass, leaving a scar. After that, whenever she attended banquets, she always wore gloves. Philip probably regretted it deeply. That was why now, he held a carving knife in his hand, ignoring his fingers covered in cuts and wounds, carving her name onto the urn stroke by stroke. Beloved Cressida. Just a few words, yet they carried blood and tears, filled with delayed guilt and love. I stood on the balcony of the cruise ship suite, letting the sea breeze brush against me. Sunlight passed through the sheer curtains, casting shifting shadows across Philip's face. He lowered his eyes and gently wiped the blood from the urn with his fingertips. It was just like the day I first arrived at the orphanage. Back then, he had used his small hands to wipe away my tears and runny nose. Then he had awkwardly comforted me. Don't be afraid, Beatrice. Big Brother will protect you forever. Chapter 07. Actually, traveling around the world with Philip wasn't that bad. Aside from feeling disgusted sometimes, the experience was actually quite enjoyable. I had never been to such beautiful places before. He would plan the itinerary several days in advance, then carry Cressida's urn with him and carefully photograph the scenery along the way. Sometimes, he would even explain the history of every place they visited to her. Whenever curious strangers asked, he would openly admit, "She's my love." As for our engagement ring, he had casually given it away to a street artist during the very first stop of his journey. In exchange, he received an oil painting of him and Cressida embracing each other in a bar. The trip went smoothly. It was just that sometimes, Philip would stare blankly at the distant lakes and mountains. Back when we were struggling, we had neither the time nor the money to travel, so we could only dream about those places we wanted to visit, lying in our tiny rented apartment and imagining our future. But later, when we finally had money, we became busier and busier. He once said that after we got married, we would go to Iceland for our honeymoon and watch the northern lights. When we grew old, we would find a peaceful place and spend our retirement there. But I never got to see the day we married, and I never got to grow old with him. It turned out that nothing lasts forever. Anyone could walk separate paths at any moment. Chapter 08. A few months later, Philip passed by a bridal shop. Perhaps the wedding dress displayed in the window caught his eye. Almost unconsciously, he stopped. I moved closer to take a look. The wedding dress was beautiful. The cascading skirt flowed down like a waterfall, resembling a galaxy that had fallen into the mortal world. Wrapped in a hazy, fairy-like beauty, it looked very similar to the one Philip and I had tried on together back then. Philip stood silently in front of the window. Tiny reflections of light shimmered in his eyes, filled with anticipation and nostalgia. That night, he held his phone tightly and sat by the hotel window, looking through our old photos for the entire night. From high school, to university, and then to the present. In almost every picture together, I was focused on looking at the camera, while he was focused on looking at me. One old photo after another passed across the screen. Finally, Philip's finger stopped on my high school graduation picture. His gaze crossed through time and met the 18-year-old me. The next second, he dropped his phone as if he had been burned. Uneasily, he rubbed his ring finger, but it was empty. The engagement ring had long been traded away for that painting. I stood beside Philip, watching him coldly. What was he afraid of? Was he afraid of facing the 18-year-old me, whose eyes were filled with nothing but him? Or was he remembering how much he had once loved me, afraid that he had made the wrong choice? But it didn't matter anymore. After all, I had done nothing wrong. The thing I should reflect on was my judgment and my choices, not my sincerity or my love. Early the next morning, when Philip left the hotel, he unexpectedly didn't bring Cressida's urn with him. Instead, he went to a jewelry store and ordered a new pair of diamond rings. The rings were called Rebirth. The shop assistant smiled and asked, "Are these for your new marriage with your wife?" Philip's lips curved slightly. His eyes were filled with relief and anticipation. "No, it's a new beginning." Chapter 09. That night, he buried Cressida's ashes on a quiet island and spent the entire night talking to her in a soft, endless murmur. "I'm leaving. Beatrice is still waiting for me. I let her down once. I can't keep making the same mistake. But I don't regret loving you. In this life, we were destined to meet but not to be together. In the next life, let's truly stay by each other's side." After laying Cressida to rest, Philip hurriedly booked a flight back home. The moment he landed, he went straight to the company. Along the way, his expression remained calm, but the tension and anticipation between his brows were impossible to hide. However, that anticipation completely disappeared when he searched the entire company and still couldn't find me. With a hint of impatience, he pushed open Sean's office door. I leaned forward and looked at Sean. A year had passed since I last saw him. He had lost weight, but he seemed much more mature and composed. Even when Philip barged in recklessly, Sean only glanced at him indifferently. "Where's Beatrice? Is she avoiding me?" Philip's voice was quiet, carrying a trace of exhaustion. Sean stared at him without saying a word. After a long silence, He let out a cold laugh. Didn't I tell you already? She's dead. She died in the same car crash as Cressida. Chapter 10. Philip froze. With a thud, the diamond ring box slipped from his hand. The afternoon sunlight was bright, reflecting off the fallen diamonds and making his eyes sting. As if he suddenly realized something, he raised his head sharply. His face turned as pale as paper. What did you say? He gritted his teeth, his voice rough and broken, as if the words had been forced out from his throat. Sean had lost his patience. He bent down, took several sheets of paper from the safe, and threw them harshly at Philip's face. She died together with Cressida, right in front of you. Before she died, she was still trying to crawl toward you, hoping you would save her. Did you not see her? The sharp edge of the paper cut Philip's skin. His head turned from the impact, and a faint streak of blood appeared on his pale face. His tall body trembled for a moment as he stared blankly at the white papers slowly drifting to the floor. They were my death certificate. No, no. This can't be her. Like all his strength had been drained away, he collapsed to his knees. He gripped the clothes over his chest and breathed heavily. I bent down and moved closer to look. Seeing my own death certificate with my own eyes was a strangely surreal experience. Just a few short lines had sealed away my entire 27 years of life. Sean's eyes were cold, and his voice was filled with suppressed rage. The day she came back from her business trip, she went to your company to find you. That was when she ran into Cressida downstairs. A car lost control and crashed into both of them. Our little sister, who we depended on each other for 20 years, died right in front of you. What were you doing at that time? You were holding that enemy of yours, crying and begging the doctor to save her. I handled Beatrice's funeral alone. I was even afraid you wouldn't be able to take it, so I didn't dare tell you. Those days, I couldn't eat properly or sleep peacefully. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see Beatrice crying and calling out to me that she was in pain. But what did you do? You disappeared with your enemy's ashes. Philip, why wasn't it you who died back then? I looked at Sean's bloodshot eyes, and my heart ached again and again. At this point, the person I couldn't let go of the most was him. He had been abandoned by his parents when he was young and had finally found a family we could rely on each other for. But now, he was alone again. Philip's dark pupils trembled slightly. The next second, he began coughing violently. A mouthful of blood surged from the corner of his lips, soaking his white shirt. He stared blankly as he reached out and gently touched the blood-stained death certificate. Name of deceased, Beatrice. Gender, female. For 20 years, he had written my name countless times. But now, he looked as if he didn't recognize the words in front of him. Stubbornly and unbelievably, he rubbed over my name again and again. The blood spread across the paper, blooming into a vivid red rose. I looked at Philip clutching my death report, feeling a mixture of bitterness and sorrow. I wasn't heartbroken for him. I only pitied the person I used to be, the girl who had fought with everything she had just to survive. Chapter 11. A gust of wind squeezed through the narrow gap in the window, making a hoarse and muffled whimpering sound. Sean had lost his patience. He stepped forward, grabbed Philip by the collar, and stared at him through gritted teeth. What are you trying to disgust people with by acting like this? Don't humiliate yourself in front of me. Philip gently pushed his hand away. He raised his sleeve, casually wiping away the blood from the corner of his lips, then looked calmly at Sean. Where are Beatrice's ashes? His voice was hoarse, and his dark eyes carried a sick, almost desperate madness. She's still waiting for me to marry her. I still owe her a wedding. Let me see her. Ha. Sean took 2 steps back. Keep dreaming. Philip closed his eyes in despair. After a long silence, he finally spoke with a choked voice. Sean, I'm also her family. I'm begging you, let me see her one last time. Sean let out a cold laugh. Do you deserve that? The last thing Beatrice saw was you holding another woman and crying your heart out for her. She probably hated you more than anything. Why would she ever want to see you? Philip's face instantly turned deathly pale. I truly didn't want to see him, but I actually didn't hate him that much. After all, we had depended on each other for so many years. Even without love, there was still family between us. I only regretted one thing. I regretted all those days when I had been full of hope, believing I could build a happy life with him. Chapter 12. Sean turned around, opened the door, and called for his assistant. Andy, see him out. Don't let him in again. Andy froze for a moment, but still stepped forward, trying to help Philip up. Philip, however, remained completely motionless, as if he were already dead inside. Andy sighed. He stood up helplessly and spoke softly. His tone was as respectful as always, but his words were merciless. Philip, there's something you should know. When Beatrice went on that business trip, she originally wasn't supposed to come back for half a month, but she wanted to make it back in time for your birthday. She worked overtime day and night, forcing the entire schedule to be completed in just 1 week. Also, she could return early and surprise you. Who would have thought something like this would happen? She never should have died. Philip suddenly raised his head. His bloodshot eyes locked onto Andy. What did you say? Andy ignored him and continued speaking to himself. Oh, right. Before every business trip, she would leave me a letter and tell me that if something happened to her, I should give it to you. After saying that, he hurried back to his desk and brought over a thick stack of envelopes. I remembered now. Before every long trip, I would leave him a letter. It wasn't exactly a death letter. It was more like a reassurance, because Philip's parents had died unexpectedly when he was 4 years old, leaving not a single word behind. That experience had left him with a deep psychological scar. When he was in the orphanage, he was always afraid that the people around him would suddenly disappear the next second. Once, I went on a trip with the orphanage director. After I came back, he hugged me and cried pitifully for the entire night. He was afraid I would leave and never return, afraid that I didn't want him anymore. He cried so much that I couldn't sleep, so I imitated the way my grandmother used to comfort me. I held his head in my arms and softly whispered in his ear, "Don't cry, I'm not abandoning you." After that, it became a habit. For the next 20 years, whenever he woke up from nightmares, I would hold him, gently stroke his hair, and tell him that I was still here. Philip's hands trembled as he desperately tore open the envelopes. I moved closer to look. Honestly, I couldn't remember the exact contents anymore. I only remembered that the first sentence of every letter was, "I'm not leaving you." Hot tears fell drop by drop, blurring the words on the paper. Philip lowered his eyes and read every word carefully. The rest looked almost like ordinary daily reminders. Sometimes I reminded him to take his medicine on time. Sometimes I told him not to forget to throw away the food in the fridge. Sometimes I hoped that at my funeral, he could invite a centaur. The last letter was written before my most recent business trip. At that time, we had just decided that we would get married once I came back. I never thought anything would happen to me, so I wasn't leaving him a final message. I was writing about my dreams for our wedding. I wanted Sean to wear a wedding dress and scare Philip when he turned around. I wanted to replace the bouquet with a cat teaser wand, so whoever caught it could receive a little orange kitten after the wedding. I wanted to force Philip to wear a frog costume and dance with me. I had so many things I wanted to do. Unfortunately, none of them would ever happen. Everything had gone smoothly along the way. Who could have imagined that something would happen right in front of his company? Philip pressed the letters tightly against his chest and cried out in unbearable pain, like a wounded beast on the verge of death. Beatrice. Beatrice. His entire body trembled. He cried until his voice nearly disappeared. Beatrice, come back. I was wrong. I was really wrong. It seemed that only now did he truly understand what he had lost. I knelt in front of him and quietly looked at his devastated face. Just like before, I gently patted his head. My palm passed through his hair, leaving behind nothing. I sadly withdrew my hand. Even though he couldn't hear me, I still wanted to say it. Philip, this time, I don't want you anymore. Chapter 13. Philip cried until he passed out and was taken to the hospital by Sean. After waking up, he seemed much calmer. He quietly stared at the ceiling, as if lost in thought. After a long while, he glanced at Sean, who was sitting nearby watching over him, then climbed out of bed. Sean didn't move. He only looked at him coldly. But the moment he saw Philip climb onto the windowsill, he hurriedly rushed over to stop him. What are you doing? He grabbed Philip's arm and slammed him onto the floor. Philip struggled to stand up. Without saying a word, he tried to climb back onto the windowsill. Sean finally lost his patience and punched him. What the hell are you trying to do? Philip wiped the blood from his nose. His expression was completely serious, as if what he said was only natural. I'm going to accompany Beatrice. She's timid. She must be scared being alone. You still have to manage the company. It's inconvenient for you to go stay with her. I'm the perfect person to go. I stepped back in shock. Don't come accompany me. I'd find you annoying. Sean let out a cold laugh, his voice icy. Accompany her? Do you think you deserve that? You should stay alive and spend the rest of your life suffering, trying to atone for your sins. I didn't think so. Someone like him, who could change his feelings so easily, how could he truly regret everything for the rest of his life because of me? Even Cressida, the woman he claimed to love so deeply that it tore him apart, was buried by him without hesitation. Sean waved toward the door and called in several strong caregivers. Keep an eye on him. Don't let him die. After saying that, he turned around and left. Before leaving, he looked back at Philip and threatened him viciously. If you die, I'll dump your ashes into a filthy ditch, so you'll never get to see Beatrice. Philip showed no reaction. I started to panic a little. If he was trapped here, wouldn't that mean I was trapped here too? Sean, how could you abandon your teammate like this? Chapter 14. Caregivers couldn't stop someone who was determined to die. Philip secretly collected sleeping pills for half a month. Then, one evening, while the caregivers weren't paying attention, he swallowed them all at once. I honestly didn't care much whether he died or not, because all this time, I had never seen another soul. After he died, I would most likely still never see him again. But as Philip slowly fell into unconsciousness, my own consciousness began to blur. Time galloped beside my ears like a wild horse breaking free from its reins. The sunset slowly climbed over a desk piled high with exam papers and textbooks. I stared at the chalk-dusted podium. Around me were the noisy voices of classmates chatting and laughing. Beatrice. A young man's clear and gentle voice sounded especially beautiful against the sharp noise of the classroom. I turned around. 18-year-old Philip had slightly curled hair that fluttered with his breathing in the breeze, covered in a layer of golden sunlight. Beatrice. It really is you. His eyes were red as he carefully took my hand, pressed it against his cheek, and gently rubbed against it. Did you come to take me with you? I heard that after people die, the person they love most will come to take them away. So it's true. The surroundings suddenly fell silent. Time seemed to freeze at that moment. Only his hurried breathing remained, along with the beeping sound of some unknown machine. I coldly tried to pull my hand away, but he only held on tighter. No. Philip froze. Why? I let out a soft laugh and repeated. Why? Did my unconditional love for you make you forget to look in the mirror? Why do you think that after you die, I would put everything aside and come to take you with me? Philip panicked. No. Beatrice. I didn't know the person beside her was you. His tears fell onto my hand one after another. He cried like a drenched, abandoned dog. I used my school uniform sleeve to wipe them away with disgust. Does knowing or not knowing even matter? Wasn't it you who was holding her and crying? Philip held onto my hand. His thick dark eyelashes trembled slightly. Beatrice. I'm sorry. It was my fault. I love you. I only want to be with you. He stopped. You just what? I tilted my head and quietly looked at him. You just got tired of what you had. You just got bored. You just thought this life was too ordinary and wanted to chase something more exciting. You just thought that I wasn't only your lover, but also your family, that I would always forgive you and always wait for you. I sighed and slowly pried his fingers away one by one. Philip, selfishness is part of who you are. I shouldn't have kept hoping for anything from you. Philip closed his eyes, unable to look at me. Beatrice. I'm sorry. He probably didn't remember. He was the one who confessed first. He was the one who promised that no matter what happened, he would never leave me. The person who once said he would love me forever, ended up saying sorry to me. Beatrice. You can hit me, curse me, hate me, anything is fine. Just don't abandon me. I looked at his guilty and desperate expression and let out a soft laugh. Philip, do you know something? After I died, my soul stayed by your side the entire time. He suddenly raised his head, as if realizing something. His face instantly turned pale. I watched you cry your heart out for Cressida. I watched you give away my project to her family. I watched you travel around the world carrying her ashes. I watched you go to the places I always wanted to visit with her. It was disgusting. During all that time, every moment, I wanted to leave you. He tried to stop me. Beatrice. I impatiently shook off his hand. Enough. Let's end it here, Philip. We were just a doomed fate from the beginning. Please let me go. I stood up and walked toward the place filled with light. This time, Philip didn't follow me. Regrets that cannot be resolved will eventually find peace. Everything will finally fall into place. Chapter 15. Just now, I finally figured out why I had been trapped by Philip's side. It was because of our engagement. I rubbed the scorching diamond ring on my finger, feeling the strong sense of restraint it carried. Why? His ring had already been thrown away by him, yet I was the one who remained trapped. The diamond on my finger shimmered with tiny fragments of light. Before my eyes appeared the image of Philip proposing to me, his youthful and excited face. His vows echoed in my ears, as if it had all happened only yesterday. I lowered my eyes and removed the ring without the slightest hesitation. The ring turned into silver light and slowly faded away. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. My body became light and weightless, as if I could fly away at any moment. At the end of the bright light, I saw Cressida. She leaned against the wall, looking at me with a complicated expression. Why did he still choose you in the end? I glanced at her and politely replied, none of your damn business. Then I continued walking forward. Behind me came her unwilling question, leaving him like this, won't you regret it? I didn't answer her. Regret? I had been brave and sincere. I dared to love, and I dared to hate. I had done nothing wrong. The person who should regret everything was never me. Sean's bonus chapter. Chapter 01. I can't remember which Friday night it was. Like always, I had dinner with Beatrice and Philip before leaving. Years later, when I looked back on that night, I realized something. We had said goodbye so ordinarily that night, yet I would never see them again for the rest of my life. Chapter 02. Philip didn't make it through the rescue. He had taken too many sleeping pills, and he had no desire to survive at all. All of my family was gone now. In the end, I still couldn't bring myself to scatter his ashes into a filthy ditch. After all, he had been my brother in everything but blood since childhood. So, I found the place where he had buried Cressida, and I buried them together. I'm truly a genius. Chapter 03. Beatrice's epitaph was carved according to something she had once said. This Earth Life online game is broken. Half a star. Bad review. Every few weeks, I would visit her. I would clean her grave and pour her some tea. Sometimes, when the company was too busy and I had to leave in a hurry, I wouldn't have time to make tea, so I would just pour her some oriental leaf tea as a substitute. It didn't matter anyway. She wouldn't be able to taste it. Chapter 04. Recently, 4-leaf clovers have grown all over the cracks at the foot of her gravestone. Whenever I walked over, they would sway and shake their little leaves. It was just like back then in the orphanage. Beatrice would sit on the swing and wave at me from far away, shouting, "Big brother." Chapter 05. 5 years after I got married, my daughter was born. She was so tiny, even smaller than Beatrice when she had first arrived at the orphanage. When I took her from the nurse's arms, I suddenly froze. Tears fell from my eyes before I even realized it. On her shoulder was a birthmark shaped like a 4-leaf clover, and with every breath she took, it gently swayed toward me, as if waving hello. Cressida's bonus chapter. Chapter 01. Actually, the first time I met Philip wasn't at the bar. It was at a company presentation. The three of them sat together, like an inseparable triangle. Philip looked at Beatrice beside him with gentle focus, not sparing a single unnecessary glance at anyone else. She raised her hand, and he handed her water. She shrank her neck from the cold, and he immediately gave her his coat. I was envious, and at that moment, my useless half-brother shamelessly walked over and mocked me. Getting into the company doesn't mean anything. Dad would never hand an important project to a girl. The family fortune will all be mine. Stop dreaming. I envied Beatrice even more. What did it feel like to be cherished by someone so considerate and caring? So that day at the bar, I boldly walked over, Although he pushed me away, both he and I knew he had already taken the bait. The heartbreak on Beatrice's face was truly beautiful. Chapter 02. After that, every time Philip saw me, he would glare at me fiercely. Seeing that usually calm and composed face show such vivid emotions because of me gave me an incredible sense of accomplishment. In the business world, we fought each other without mercy. In private, we would start insulting each other the moment we met. When the arguments became too intense, I would grab his hair and bite his lips. He was never willing to back down either. I thought I was the most special person in his heart. Only later did I realize I had been completely wrong. Chapter 03. That bastard Sean buried Philip right next to me. According to some experienced old ghosts, only souls without lingering attachments can be reincarnated. In extremely rare cases, souls without attachments may still remain in the human world because of certain bonds. During that time, neither humans nor spirits can see them. Beatrice was probably one of those cases. I couldn't reincarnate. I had an obsession I couldn't let go of. My family didn't love me. They treated me as a resource to exchange for business opportunities. The person I loved didn't love me either. He treated me like a toy to chase excitement. I wanted someone to love me, but that was impossible. Philip couldn't reincarnate either. He was even more ridiculous. He hoped Beatrice would forgive him. That was even more impossible. And so, the two of us remained here, looking at each other with hatred, forever unable to move on.